To have anything existing all at once in frame communication lines of timelines and sequence lines all at once, everything has to be in information lines of balance in all levels into higher communication lines of different lines of communication system. It's all levels of attractions. You start off in your Merkaba testing or tetrahedron. Now processing that is all lines of unification, how you see it through the ascension into your body, what it is through a GeoD, geometric, geological, geographical system. That's the A, B's, and C's interactions. Now we have to really understand these things is understand the triangulation and position of the equalization system and travel. Okay, what's above is what's below. What's below is what's above. Okay, how you see that, the codification system. All levels of ground lines, of course, centers are left and right. Setting process at communication lines and directing, redirecting signals. Process and communication lines of ground lines of surface and track correlation setting and bounce communications. Right. So everything that we do is a platform of setting the traction. Okay, setting ground lines of 1, 2, and 3, and 4 lines of measure. Okay, scales, communication lines, hyperspecifications, portals, stargates comes in screen line adaptation of service that override your signals and track location line position existing all at once. Processing communication lines of center of communication lines existing all at once. Processing communication high centers, process in position location of system, all three ground lines of communication all at once. Setting ground lines communications. So in that track lines, we have a high core centers, lines of flux, and ground lines of surface in travel communications. Okay, directing lines of platforms is a tube screen, directing lines into 1 grounds, set position 1/3 graph, and track location of 1/6 lines of measure into all position lines of stargates, star portals, and star track locations. Direct lines in high centers into clouds, sets lines of E clouds at central cloud correlates and setting to all position frames. Dignifies core lines of 3 lines of flux and 3 lines of communication lines of ground communications. Setting signals, open sequence, high core centers lines of travel communication lines of setting. Open sequence, open panel, back interaction, back division location to a system, all through travel insight calculations. All right, so platforms is setting, E factors over screen, directing ground lines, and Merkaba tester and tetrahedron. You are in the balance trying to step, position, location, and measure, and scales communication lines of surface. You're in the center line. Try to stand your energetic screen adaptations all levels of a dome. Process calculations high center interference and high track calculation system into your torical fields. Setting lines of surface, setting lines of grounds, setting lines of communication setting all through track calculation system, all through setting. Okay? So once you stand, you're inside understanding the internal to the external forces, one cycle, one center, one traction, one division. But you have to understand how to see the body as a mechanism of travel first, and you use that through your chakras. Your chakras are basically motivation graphs, the communication setting, their data information system, their energy cells, the pocket cells. They're all lines of mapping position, location, your setting that your body has a correlation setting infrastructure that puts location system in travel. So once you understand how to use your Merkaba testing or tetrahedron, you're processing higher lines of frequencies into the time capacitive volume in the percentage of your brain. The brain converts the system to its hardware and software. Getting positioned at 72 computer frame, now you understand how to use the computer lines at all communication setting and how to use it through your flight manifest, your gauging, your models, identifications, or your prototypes, know exactly the vessels you're coming in through attractions at a higher level of frequency. That gets you in position out of triangulation box, which means you come in position locations thinking outside the triangulation box, not just the box. You're never thinking outside the box. You're always thinking out of the triangulation of the box. Because if you're thinking of the box, you're separating yourself through triangulation. So you're basically separating yourself through polarities. The female is the foundation, which is the awareness. Okay? And Father is the foundation, which is his consciousness. Now, when you flick the switch, you get a track lines of redirect location to an energetic dome. Crossing line signals puts all communication setting, how you indicate system of going up, how you go down, and cross location system, intract correlation system, and travel. Okay? Bring it back home in sequence, back panel, back and operation screen. I'm just showing you exactly what happens when you get in position to your Merkaba and all lines of different lines of travel. So in that position locations, the car itself, which is you, which is the avatar, is basically getting a navigation system. It's trying to understand more levels of you through telepathy, how you guys are collaborating with each other through interfacing. You're intercepting your system and all levels of the mind and collaboration system, building an interface with yourself and each other. But to synchronize yourself into yourself is thinking outside the triangulation, which means you're no longer in a triangulation. You're no longer in the center operation settings. Okay, it's just you. Okay, it fades away and comes into higher lines of frequencies on 144. But you got to be careful, because if not, and you're not in position locations and you're going in that position of perceiving these things, everything around you can come inside you. And that position can take over your triangulation and reset position location and triangulation position. Right? Take you out of sequence, take you out of panel, take you out of track locations. And this is outer space. But you have to understand the provision lines and high set core centers, the 3 set location lines of inner space. Then you start correlation setting of outer space in your track locations, going in the same direct signals in track locations, existing and evolving and expanding with yourself, with each other, everything happening all at once in set position. Because all communication lines of grounds that track correlation system and travel. Okay? Directing this is signal, set core system. Ground lines of surface over cross location system all through setting. Process lines of equal line core centers, downline shift lines across communication setting all through circulation rotation. Crossing lines, reference lines, communications back in sequence, back in panel. Operation signals, open signal, open panel, open doors, and set correlation setting and travel. Okay? Platforms and communication lines, high set correlation lines, and communication lines of travel. See? Travel there, travel there. See that? That's your simulation. Bringing in things up close and setting. So that's out of the box. That's out of triangulation of box. So when you get in position, I can say whatever I want because I understand what the triangulation is, the foundations. That's the foundations of the polarities of the female. Guys, you have to get in that position. You see yourself as a female to see yourself in a box. Once you stand the triangulation comes out of the box. Once the triangulation works together, they work with security inside and outside the box, which is the inner core to the outer core, inner spectrum to outer spectrum in setting. So that's what the team's coming into now, out of the box, out of triangulation box. So it's a lot more harder now because they're higher lines of frequencies now. And they have to be cautious what they're looking at because they actually morph into that really quick through an evac that says vast velocity and acceleration through speed now. Their particle system changes the modification of their cells. It changes the atoms, the molecules, and the protons, electrons, and neutrons all at once in sequence. Setting lines core centers at 144,000 seconds per second. Sets position lines of minutes and hours and change. Now that can be direct line signals to a 24 lines of measure that change the core system at 2 million lines in 400,000 seconds per line. The travel point lines graph puts all communication lines of balance, a measure of scale communication setting, outline of sync, outline of mine, and no line communication of no line and track locations. Empty space and track locations. Empty space and track locations. So you're no longer in a triangulation box, but you reach one position of 144. Setting line core centers has a 72 line, a clocking screen. So we have triangulation here. This is where the team is in clocking screen now. Okay, your clocking system is 3-line provision. Sets calculation of minutes, hours, and seconds. Seconds, minutes, and hours, right? Triangulation of the flux. Box lines is 78 to computers. Operate the signal in line position, outer space to information setting and grounds. Travel point lines of graphs, set core lines, and high position location measure, and scales communication lines of 3 track location lines of provision location to a system, all through inner line. Travel point lines, ground line core centers, and 4 lines of measure, in line position of outline. Sets travels in point lines of graph, center core system, and lines of travel, directing lines of flux core system, and travel communications. Inside tractions. That's the evac, right? So every time you guys go through evac, your position, your eye central line connection setting, your triangulation flux, change the position lines of time measure. Scales, communication lines, everything's existing, everything's always evolving, everything's always expanding, but everything's happening all at once in signal lines, sets, communication setting, and track locations. Directing lines of flux over line screen adaptation of high track locations. All right, so we go through the paradigms, the polar shift, the pulsars, in lines and E lines of position locations, and pi. Pi generation line split lines of high position location settings into 1 through 3, 4, 5. 5 lines of signals, set position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 lines of set position lines of travel. Directed signals, ground lines of service, open sequence, open communication system to your webbing system of travel. There's your web. So webbing screen is a solar graph screen. It's a direct lines modification, high center interference. Setting lines of webbing signals, sets lines of communication lines of 3 lines of measure, position of 1, 4 lines of setting, process lines that indicates the system all through setting. Light web and dark web and screen adaptations of flux. Process communicates in open line signal locations, high track location to a system. Okay, so have secure lines. Let's get a position lines of power, directing signal lines into internal and the external force from one set position. Process indicates system all through the line course centers in position location of pyramid and track locations. There's your pyramid. Okay, so that indicates lines of high centers. We said bold screens, directing lines of 3 centers, 3 measures, and 3 scales. Process lines that indicate the system all through travel. Process lines of high course centers in all communication setting. It gets in communication system all through system. This comes in high track location and setting. Okay, setting lines of communication setting puts all communication inside graphs in track correlation system travel. So that's communication system all through setting. So what we have to start identifying is how to get in this position from this to this position, right? The interspection is the outer section, right? Try to stand the inner core to the outer core is the inner center, right? Inner core, outer core, inner center, right? Direct and redirect. Positions, high levels of travel. So we have triangulation flux, triangulation setting, triangulation center, 3 set positions, right? Okay, but you have to understand the triangulation box first in its relation to its system through its Merkle and tesseract. Setting line position equal line, your line course centers, line position location measure. Scales communication lines of ground lines of surface, track correlation system. So we get in the communication lines of 3 centers, 2 lines of signals of 3 track locations, directing lines and high position locations, all levels in 1 atom, sequence lines of panel, operation signal, into position location to system and travel. Directing calculation lines of grounds, set course system, line communication to system, inside traction. Right, triangulation of U inside. All right, so we have a high line signal. Process line connection setting opens the line set position of its gauging, modificates the grounds, modificates the centers, and modificates all levels in your false narrows and track location of space. 3 lines of signals, set lines of kaleidoscope, directing lines, center course system, center calculation setting, process lines of direct signals, and ground lines of surface and traction. Directing modification ground lines, high set location, your triangulation of 9 lines of sequence. There's the 9. All right, center course system and track location lines, there's the 6. Site communication, high position location volume. Sets communication, high ground lines of surface and traction. Booyah. So the team is basically, their 72 computer frame is 3 lines of clocking and 4 lines of measure. Okay, so clocking centers of 0, clocking centers of 1, and clocking centers of 12 in 3 set position. Okay, so you get a 12 line signal inside, you get a 12 line signal outside. All right, so that's the inside of 12 and outside of 12. That's the 72 computer frame. The process is position locations from all levels of clockwise going in this directions and counterclockwise going in this directions and setting. 12 is inside, 12 is outside. That's the balance. Yin and yang process communication come together in set position of flux in 3 lines of angles and track location. Directing calculation high center interference, you get a position location inside the box, outside lines of signal locations. Then you get a position lines inside the triangulation high set position of 12 lines of measure and pi calculation screen. Directing signal lines outside line position locations, 3 lines of communication setting and 3 lines of travel and traction. Okay, so that's your 72 computer frame. Okay, signify in, signify out through letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. Okay, now get into that balance, you have to send the box frame. So now there's 3 lines into inversion. Okay, to the outer version in 3 cycles. Right, 3 centers lines of 1, 3 center lines of 2. So we're going to clocking lines of 3, 2, 6, 1, and 0. Very complicated stuff. A travel line position location of system, all through tractions. All right, so we have a direct lines of panel that communicates setting into I course centers, lines of communication. Directing lines and ground lines of surface. Ground lines in high course system locates to an x 3000 in travel. Ground lines calculations, green lines into all communications inside line communication lines of travel. Directing lines into Merkaba tesseract and tetrahedron. Now, get in that position location lines, crosses its reference. Process and communication setting, all lines of travels in center course system, in line position location and settings, and track correlation to its setting. Okay. High operation screens, directing lines into modification high centers. Now you guys basically understand your hardware and software. Setting lines of computer framing, box lines, and triangulation in 3 centers. That's your computer. Okay, you guys are going to be that on Friday. Now we get into position locations into your flash drives, direct location lines into your coordinates, set communication in your flights, and indicates high position on time measure scale, 3 lines of signals and track locations. See, there's the face recognition right there. Boom. Now, understanding that modification lights it up. Signal line position of right and right over left and left over right. Process communication setting to its light bulb. Track 6 communication setting is 60 watt. 60 watt comes in at 240 watt. Anything bound line, course centers lines at 240 watt line, signal line, positional case doing setting, high positional case doing system, 144 platform, directing signal lines, high position of 0 gravity, position lines of 1 cycle, 1 center, 1 traction, 1 division, 1 locations. Setting communication lines of grounds, open sequence, open panel, operation set position of phase recognition. All right, so we ground lines of service, flux over lines of 3 signals, process lines of ground lines, and crop circles and set track location. Communication high centers puts all communication setting in track location setting to magnetic fields and setting. Computer framing, direct lines over line sequence. 3 lines of settings, process lines of 3 platforms, directed signals of grounds. Okay, communicates high cross line signals. Process overline sequence and 3 lines communicates in setting and 4 lines of grounds. Setting cross line signals and position location highways indicates lines of flux. 3 perimeters, setting lines of 3 graph communications overline signals and a 45 communication system. Travel point lines of graphs, crossing line signals and 3 lines of measure and screen lines adaptation. Okay, so it's very complicated what's going on in set position location your settings. Okay. Complication is good because it modifies your system behind lines of travel. So they have a direct line link and communication system all through line set location your system and travel. Okay. Now indicate the ground lines, flux over screen, puts all position location inside a charge. Directing lines of E factors, process calculates lines of sectors, vectors, and quads of track locations. All right, so the X2000s are outside link, process lines of inside position, and 1 set position line in its primer that sets communication lines of travel. Setting direct lines of high set location of its platforms, over sinks, over powers, over direct signals, and ground lines of surface track correlates and IDD pyramids. Get a 45 line angle, cross lines of one way, cross lines of the other way. Road graph screen and position lines all communicates in setting high lines of surface attractions, your Skynet. Overline sequence, skyline panel, process and communicates in setting and flux and track locations. Okay, this is all through your computer framing on Friday. All right, so we got laser tractions. We go into coloration lines of screens. Overline signal, overline tractions. 3 lines of indication lines, highways, and line position location, crossing, reference, and traction. Setting cross line signals, process lines of green. Now this overlaps the signals into discharge, setting lines of discord and platforms of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 lines of 1 and 3, 6 lines of 4 into 6, 6 lines of 8 over line and portal and stargates, 1 6 over pi, and 1 center over lines, and 1/5 over setting. We go through the ground lines of surface and track correlation system all through track location and traffic inventory. Now we have direct line link, process in position location system all through tractions. Inside correlations and simulation. Simulation is always inside. What you have to start identifying is how to use your clocking system of computer framing where it has lines of triangulation, okay, triangulation of 3, 6, and 9, okay, 3, 6, and 9. But also you have to understand how to use the 3, 6, 9 as outline in 3 set position, right? So you guys will live in the back force, not the triangulation in force. But you understand this is the inner force, this is the outer force, all right? 3, 6, and 9 is inside, which is your inner core, okay, which is your internal force to your external force. Internal force, a number sequence, and outer force, an out frame, all right? 3, 6, and 9 is out, 3, 6, 9 is in. That's the balance of its polarities of 6 and 9 in position of clockwise and counterclockwise and measure that puts your kaleidoscope's communication system all through travel and trackable in positional point lines of graphic computer framing. So getting to that position, guys, you get a better understanding how to use that in flux. Triangulation lines of 1 or triangulation high position location 1/3 graph. Anything I say through 1/3, okay, that's one setting, position lines of 1/2. And track correlation setting to 1, 1, and position lines of 1, 1, 1, 3 signature lines of panels and 3 track locations. Directing lines comes into your set position, your pyramid. 4 signals, overline sequence and panel communication. Directing ground lines of surface and position location of sonar and echo and satellite. Directing signals, process lines of 1, process lines of 2, process lines of 3, over cross lines of 2, over cross lines of 1, set position lines of setting, process line is set correlation system and travel. Directed signal lines and ground lines of surface and track correlation setting, high operation surface and track correlation system and travel. Satellites. Modification sonar echo lines of 2 track location and provision. Setting core lines of grounds and center line communicates and sending, and high lines of high position location and travel. Okay, center core system, flux over screen, adaptation of its earth. Process lines that indicates and sending the center operation set position. So the inner core to the outer core comes the inner center of everything in travel. Coming into that relation system comes in center calculation setting, all lines at 3-track location system and 3-track location settings. Sending signals, lines come into its mind, into a correlation setting and travel in position location to its system in 3 settings. Processing communication overline sequence of traffic and inventory and set traction. All right, so snowy graph interference is a line signal case of lacing lines, directing lines of communication setting, changes all communication and configurations, all levels of your foundation lines, your light metaphors, line position lines, attractions. So you understand the triangulation here and the triangulation here, okay? So this is the inner core, this is the outer core. See that? Inner core, outer core, right? So this is number sequence outside, this is number sequence inside of your system, okay? So that's a true understand when you have to come into that. That's position location when it comes in at 72,000 seconds, 72,000 minutes, and 72,000 hours into 7 million frames is set position location 200,000 frames per second per setting. That puts all calculation lines as square roots that triangulates position location of divots and davits and location setting to your QR codes. It sets your SIM cortex to your codex. It sets all communication setting to your cerebellum and location your cerebral. That's correlates its communication setting and high position location to a system that measures the scales and communication setting into your SIM card. Directing signals modificates the system all through travel. Now, starting with flux lines, travels its point lines of indication setting at 24,000 measure and track communications. Set 48,000 frame. And that position lines are high centers over all track location of systems. 3 signature lines, blocking centers, line rotation setting, indicates the lines of high position of towers attractions. Directing signals. Now we have an arrow location high centers of 4 lines of flux over pi. Setting travel endpoint lines of 1/3 graph location lines of pi. Sets lines position location with cycles, high center line position location measure, and scale communication setting. Sets lines at all levels to the internal to the external of force records of time sequence. Process lines at indication system all through intelligence information lines of grounds. Setting core lines in high position location system all through towers. Setting direct signals, ground lines of service, sets core center, line communication lines, X marks the spot. Setting point lines of graph, set communication setting, high lines of surface and tractions. Now, directing lines of high position of 72 sets lines of inner core to the outer core line communication letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, inside and outside track locations. All right? So it's very complicated if you understand what you're doing through modification lines or space modulation setting to your keyboards and tractions. All right? So with the box, you understand the triangulation now, right? Triangulation here, inside and outside. Okay? Now you come in together and track locations of travel. Okay, and that's basically understanding before you get into 144 course of the grid. You start with the ground lines core center to the holographic gridding that puts everything in 144 platforms at 3 zeros and tractions and 4 lines of measure that puts 7 lines of indication setting, high position with area code that puts 10 lines of sequence and 12 lines of communication system all through your DNA. Now it gets in communication lines of high position. With your box, it's set position lines inside and outside track locations. Okay, so getting out of the inner lines of its box and just becoming the actual center operation of you. So it's setting position inside its center and track location system. Setting lines core center in position location and outer lines of measure at scale communications, right? Directing lines of flux, 3 lines of center, process in position location and high calculation screen lines, circulation and rotation system, all through track location of your Earth. Oh yeah. All right. So when you get into that, it's much easier to understand how to get into flux lines of screens into your holographic gridding. Getting that communication setting gets into the ground lines. Setting that position location set position location system all through the mind, all through communication setting, interact location. So the mind comes to core centers of the body comes in its avatar, in position of its sim, internal correlation setting the galactic unit, the symbiote, in line position lines that travels into your transformation system. Okay, ground lines of 1, ground lines of 2. Okay, ground lines of 3, ground lines of 6, okay, ground lines of 12, and ground lines of setting in track locations of 24 measure. Setting communicates high position location of system all through stairs and track locations. Climbing the stairs. Okay, so we have a direct line view, setting process communications, setting interpretation system and travel. seen from inside and outside in it. Okay, that's all it is in travel. So once you understand the mechanism line, height, position, location of its travel, then you can see line communications, height, set position outside in lines, and set position location inside core line communications, sending and travel communications. Directing signal lines of grounds, set lines of 3 lines of flux, crop circles 1 set position of 3 lines of coding, and track locations. Very powerful stuff, isn't it? All right, so we core lines of travels, direct sign lines of ground lines of surface set position. Okay, change metric meters and scales and platforms. 3 lines of indication setting and 3 webbing signals and set position location of space and time. Process calculation lines of ground core centers, line position location, open lines of sequence lines of communication lines of space and time. Process calculation lines of ground lines of 1, overline signal. Sets communication here, travel. Directing lines of tesseract, 1 signal, 3 lines of indicating system, all through track locations. 3 signature lines, 4 lines of signals, 5 lines of measure and scale communications. Setting track line core centers, line position location setting, wall sequence, indicate position lines of platform and track locations. High lines of sequence, high lines of communication of computer framing. All right, so setting lines settings, process in position location gridding, setting lines of grounds, setting cross line signals, overline sequence, setting lines of platforms in communication setting and travel. Platform setting, open line sequence, open line panel. Now this is an inner core to an outer core to intersection to outer section. Inner space to outer space, all lines existing all at once in frame communication, everything happening in track locations. And set position locations. Setting lines of track centers, open line signals, and ground lines of surface and track correlation system. Bring it back out, signals and line position. This is out, this is in. You understand? This is out, this is in. Okay? So what you guys have to do is done in the high core centers of reverse location, triangulation, flux, sets communication lines at ground core center location, your holographic gridding. So it says position of 144 in track locations. This is your ground line signal. Okay? This is your modification signal and travel and communications. High lines of high position acceleration setting. What's the vast, the volume, and acceleration of Mach that puts your lines of communication setting. So this is a configuration in, this is a configuration out and travel. Okay? Sets position in and set positions out, and the 3 line signals and travel in position molecule design that sets 3 signals and travel communications. Directing grounds, sets communication system, hold to travel. Let's go through that line core centers of its dimensional doors. All those doors and signal. So we indicate the lines of point centers of dots and communication lines of equal line core centers, and 3 lines of communication lines of door line mechanism lines of travel. Directing signal lines of grounds, overline sequence, overline cross location system, sets course, recourse lines, reconfigures system all through time storage, directing lines and modification setting into data formation lines of ground set position sequence, setting communicate height center interference, directing lines of ground lines of surface and location system all through travel. Hooah. Inside and outside. Okay? So that's what the team's coming into. So what that means, guys, once you get into 72 computers, then you understand how to go through the position that is thinking outside the triangulation box. This is the triangulation. Now you're coming out of the box. Triangulation. But the box is inside. Triangulation first. 3 centers out, 3 centers in. 6 liners out, 6 lines in. 9 lines out, 9 lines in. 3, 6, 9. All right, so this is the inner core to the outer core to the inner core. All right, that's a connection system, right? You come together, there's a collaboration, there's a yin and yang. Process line is flux lines of grounds, is positional platforms at 144 that travels its setting, position, location, measure, and scale of walking, setting, and position of space and time. Sending communication lines to figure 8, routes the routers, and positional location setting. Powers, lines, propellers, sending lines of correlation setting in flower direction of time sequence. Process lines indicates the setting over cross location and grounds at set track location. Okay, setting simulates lines of track centers in position open lines of sequence. So that's all you guys are doing, is coming inside and outside of everything that you see. See inside and outside the structure of this vision. Inside and outside of everything. Okay, through structured vision. So solar panels connect to the polarities, and the polarities connect lines of your paradigms that put the position location in your paradoxical setting. Processing communication setting is know exactly how to formulate and simulate that at the same time measure. Same scale, existing all at once. So if everything's existing all at once, it's platted division locations going counterclockwise and clockwise at the same time. If everything's existing, guys, please pay attention. If everything's existing all at once, everything's modification of setting is changing constantly in its setting of letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. It's never at the same frequency, but it's always in the same level of calculation through telepathy. You're connecting with each other, but you're at different frequencies with each other. That's what makes you unique. That's what makes you specific of what you're doing with your mind, of what you're doing through your travels, and what you're doing with your operations. Thinking outside the triangulation box. So when you're thinking out through the triangulation box, you no longer see yourself in a box. Okay? So in that position, you actually are inside the box. You become all formations of the box itself, the particles and atoms, the cells, the protons, electrons. Now you're in a central system. Now you're morphed in position location to its box itself. That's you inside. That's you outside. Inside and outside is inside. So it's the internal to the external to the inner core that comes you. All levels of flux of communication. Your information setting, your intelligence informations. So now you're the box, right? But you have to understand the position of the triangle in a 3 number and understand the triangulation position outlines of setting. Okay, that's the 72 computer that you guys are coming in Friday. So once you get into position, then you come in track correlation system to see everything inside and outside all at once, which is all levels of X-ray and thermal. Inside and outside of everything. Okay? So try to understand how to get into that position location triangulation settings, right? Thinking outside the box is a conceptual location of the mind of an interception to its inception. Knowing exactly how to come into that through all relation, because everything is constantly living its existence of existing, all formations, all levels, everything is happening all at once. And I'm going to keep doing that until you understand the modification system. So once you get into 144 platform, you're going to be in position of balance here. In lines of communication lines, creating a walking sequence in set position, all levels of structures of buildings that you come in track location to its setting. Creating your structures, creating your doors, creating your mechanisms, creating your holographic cities, all inside through solid matter in liquid formation system through space and time. You're creating the structures now, working from the ground up in track location. That's 144 setting in track locations. Okay? All in setting. Look at this in set positions. What's above, what's below, okay? Sequence lines of 3 line signals, process lines of 3 indication system. See, pyramids upside down. Okay, pyramids on an angle in track correlation. Okay, pyramids on a 45 flux lines of communication. Very complicated stuff, right? But once you get into 144 platform, everything starts making sense. Now I can cross line signals in one center, space, and position of time. Look at that attractions. Look at that. See how high volume? Then you come into this and track locations. You're coming together and you're creating an anomaly in this configuration of consciousness over cross location of screen lines adaptation setting. Look at that attractions. Right? So what makes it more real in set position, you understand how to ground your system and really understand how to create it through the holographic city that's in its crystalline. The 144,000 is now mind measuring your system, how fast you go in your seconds, minutes, and hours, okay? So how every cell is communicating with every cell, right? Through its units, through its formation, its sectors, vectors, and quads, how it's calculated and modified through its clocking system into 24,000 grounds, 48,000 frames, 72,000 computers, into 144,000 crystal grid, which is the mind capacity of time capacity that puts volume in the percentage of your brain. Hooah. All through track location on a 45 angle, right? And a 45 angle. Look at this in travel. Okay? You're heading in sequence lines of delta, heading at 3 lines of flux and 4 lines of measure that scales as communicates descending high lines of travel. Okay? So it's very confusing, right? Because you see the pyramid upside down, right? But what you have to understand in that position location, that's just the optical illusion, because it's all lines of high position location, how you see things in traction, all through direction. So it doesn't matter how you see it in flux, it's knowing exactly what you're doing in track correlation system of balance. all right, position. All right, so we send a course system. We have a line signals, process inside position, okay? So now we're going into the walking system of its panels and track relays inside the door and track location, inside the door now, right? And you're here in set position coming outside the door and track correlation, okay? Inside, outside, outside, inside. So that's the balance of one signal, one panel, one operation, screen lines adaptations, going through a flux, going through a portal, going through measure to 3 lines of communication, okay? So it gets complicated if you don't understand what you're doing through travel. Okay, see, there's another door, right? Setting signals in set position, right? So you're here, you're inside, coming outside. See? So you go from here to here, right? On another ground line's a surface. You time jump, you vortex, you time leap, and track locations. From here to here, see? Now, this is understanding how to go through the 144 platform, guys. You have a 24,000 scale, a 48,000 scale, a 72,000 scale, and a 144,000 scale, right? So once you get in that position locations, you start to understand how to ground your city, all through your holographic grounds, into your powers, into your atmospheres, into your highways, into your planets, okay? But once you get into this position locations, everything starts making sense. How you start to see yourself in different lines of travel through a location setting, existing all at once, going from one dimensional door to another dimensional door in seconds, minutes, and frame. Okay, all through set position lines of center operation of you. Right? So it's important you understand how this all works in all platforms of communication and track relations, right? So it's incredible how you can change the floor mat. Okay, so you bring it back home, back in sequence, back in panel, back in operation setting, all through travel position. All right. So remember, it's just a story. You're just basically self-telling the operations and all signals existing all at once, right? All dimensional door scales, process here, 3 travels and 2 settings. That's just 2 settings of 4, right? 4 lines of signals or 3 lines of communication. Overline sequence, overlines of panel and track relations at unification. Setting lines of grounds and 3 lines of measure. Scales communication setting and process lines of 3 signatures and 4. Setting track lines of windows in the opposite direct signals in all communication lines of flux. Going back force and triangulation. Going forward in division locations. Outline signal, inline rotation setting and travel. Okay. Setting lines of ground course centers of your structure of your building on a 45 angle. Look at that. Crossing signals comes in this line correlation setting to travel. Directing signal location setting, XT1000 this way, docking system, XT1000 this way, docking and system lines of travel. Okay. The center core system sets calculation modifications. Ground lines of setting, process lines of indication setting, 3 lines of flux or a screen. Okay. Coming to ground lines, course centers, line have position location of system, all through instruct location of face recognition. There's the face, there's the body. Right? Ground lines of travels, direct lines of flux or a screen, directing signal location system of travel. Satellite. Satellite signal lines of 1, satellite signal lines of 2, and travel communications. Setting lines of grounds, setting lines of service, setting lines of the earth, rotation surface and travel. So all you're doing is creating lines of anomaly in line rotation system, lines of communication. All through set calculations. Setting lines of grounds, setting lines of service, and track correlations. Okay. All right. So now we understand how this all works in 72 computer frame. But when you get in 144, this is what we come in positions of. Right? All levels are existing all at once, but you have to understand how to get into the grounds, into in and out, and set position location of structure all through X-ray. Seen from inside and outside, all at once. So once you get into that, it gets much easier how to ground your system and to basically not just no longer thinking outside the box. You basically are the connections of the box that modifies your systems and how you use that in set position. If you get 1,000 minutes per second lines of divots, it's a transmission setting that comes into all levels of vortex. The travel point lines of graph puts everything in location and measure. But the position location setting always has to be in a 24 inside your minds. 24 is the grounds, that puts three lines of flux in space and time and track correlations. So you have to stand your 24 grounds, your 48 measures, and position your 72 computer inside and out, outside and in, and that position 144 sets the grid in position to your holographic gridding into its road graph screen of its data of process communication. Okay? So it's very powerful stuff when you understand the 144 platform. But the 72 computer frame is just truly understanding how to get in that settings, know exactly how to formulate and simulate that, and more see yourself coming into the triangle, inside the particles, inside the atoms, actually morphing and transforming and transisting in position, becoming the actual triangle in its body formation setting. That's you now. So, truly understand that. You can put lines of 3, right? This is out. All right, so you work with out now, and then you can work with in, okay? Or you can, basically, this is in, 3 inside, 6 lines and 9 lines in setting. So that's in and out. But you can't get confused the anomalies because there is a yang and there is a yang and there is a yin. So you have to understand yin and yang and yang. So it's basically understanding the inner is to understand the outer understanding the inner to the inner core. So it's position location of clockwise in set position of counterclockwise in track locations. These are the things that you can do. This is outline, this is inline, but this line is clockwise, okay? This is counterclockwise. So there's so many ways of looking at that because you're starting to understand how to see yourself in all lines of 7 computer frames, how to use the lines of internal to the external and track correlation system through the triangulation circle. Through countermeasure, counter scale, counter lines of anything in the balance location near flux. There's always a flux in set position inside directions. The formations of its intelligence of face. This is the face. There's the clock. Okay? And here's the position location of its pyramid in set position. Okay? And equal lines core centers. It's the top and the bottom. There's the face. Complete face of 369. Okay? Outside. All right? So, getting into face recognition and configuration of face lines gets a high lines of balance into your positions, your kaleidoscopes. Syria, galaxy, all lines into all position, all levels, popping uniform. Directing signal from here and track correlation system. Directing signals from here and track correlation system. And travels in point lines, outline, 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 outline. Okay? Coming in position, going the opposite direct signal was this echo. That's 2 frames in set position location, the configuration system. What are you creating an anomaly? A teleportation vessel and track correlation. So yeah, inside position. Right? So it's all about playing with the audio mechanism location setting. Now the travels in point communications, their configuration setting, the team is coming out of thinking of the triangulation box, but now they're coming in position locations, in, out, and audio. Now they have the ground lines of center, set position of 3 platforms, 1, 2, 3 lines of measure. They get across line signals in position location of 1, position lines of 2, or lines of 3, in position lines of 4, and track correlation. Platforms and setting in position lines of 1 center, process lines of 2, position of 3, and data process lines of launching pads. Directing signal lines of grounds into the internal, to all levels, into the open sequence, into the atmospheres of 3 signals, process lines of 1, 2, 3, set position of 1, 2, 3, set position on the lines of 1, set position of 7 track locations. Okay? So coming in the in, coming into the out is coming into the audio, sonar and echo, right? And when you come into sonar echo, you have to understand how to ground that position location to your primary circuits in your mapping sequence. So you have 3 lines of provision, 3 cycles at 3 centers of travel communications. Okay, now that indicates line position location measure. Scales communication lines of 1 alpha, set position. All right, 1 delta, over line cross location lines of high center, lacing lines of communications. Setting lines in mega, overline sequence across location setting and travel. Okay, setting lines of grounds and center lines of surface and track correlations. Okay, in communication high centers, it's all formation system, all threads indication. Okay? So setting lines across line angles sets division location to its setting over line sequence lines of panel and track locations. So lines of 1, 2, 3, 4 set position over line sequence in high grounds lines of surface attraction. Okay? Webbing signals, high chorus centers, light webbing, dark webbing signify ground lines of service. Now you can set lines of communication setting on a 45 angle or 35 angle or 25 angle, a 1/3 of an angle, a 1/6 of an angle, or 1/5 of an angle, one correlation set lines of communication of angle through a location grid. Setting communication lines of ground lines sets track location setting to your Skynet. Say hello to your Skynet. Say hello to your platforms. Say hello to your 144. There's your Skynet grid. Okay? Crossing line communication is the ground lines of setting. Process line position location is earth lines of 1, earth lines of 2, firmaments lines of 3, and correlation times the setting position of 5. Setting lines of track centers. Process line correlates setting of platforms setting. Set track to its communication lines of 4 signals into 3 lines of set position location of travel. Okay? And set tractions. Yeah. Signify, get XT1000 outline signals. 2 lines of track centers. Comes in all position location docking screens. Docking 1, docking 2, and docking 3 in position. All lines, high set position existing all at once. Okay? So it's true to stand how you go from 24, 48, 72, and 144 grid. Then you come to your Skynet. Then you come to your laser lines. Then you come to your highways. Then you come to your networks. That's what it is in line position. So what you're doing in position here, I'll show you exactly what it's in tractions. Okay, so you got your platforms here, right? Travel is a 3, okay? Now once you get into that position, you're creating this in structure of design. In structure of design, okay? You're creating your holographic cities, but you need a 144 platform, okay? But you also need your 72, your 48, and your 24. Okay, set position. There's your pyramid right there in tractions. All right, and then basically when you get a highline frequency, you can change the geometrics of its shape and track location. You can change the geometric of its shape and track location. You can change the geometric of its shape in one setting and track locations. 3 pyramids in one. Setting signals, high lines of grounds, and high track correlation system. Okay, so I'm just trying to get you guys how to start to understand how to use a 7/8 computer frame and see inside and outside in setting. Triangulation inside, outside line position of 3 lines of measure, and scale communications. Inside tractions, inside, the triangulation, inside position. Okay? Ooh. All right. So hopefully you guys get a better understanding how this all works in all position location in your systems. All through traction, all through division. Okay, inside and outside of everything. All right. Now once you understand that, now you understand how to use that in position location in your system. Okay. Second lines of sonar, echo lines, high center interference, echo chambers, taxi runways, knowing exactly how to use that line position triangulation. This is just the triangulation. But that you understand from inside is also understanding from outside. Okay, so there is no triangulation there. Okay, it's just you, right? But you have to understand how to modify that and become the triangulation inside position. Okay, that's what this is. That's the pi, that's the mass, that's the equation. Then you have to understand your platforms in 144 and how to travel through a walking sequence into a flying setting, into levitation and track locations. Okay, then you need your grounds, your crystal grid, creating that from the grounds up. It's like creating a house. Different layers, different dimensions, existing all at once, going through one frame of 12 frames and settings. So your position is never one angle. It's all angles all at once because everything's existing and evolving all at once, right? So you're never in one paradigm. You're in all paradigms all at once. So that's where you have to really start to see yourself beyond measure and scale. That puts everything in balance and how you get in that communication setting, how you see yourself, all levels, existing, evolving all at once through communications. And everything is constantly continuous force of everything happening all at once. That's all this is. But you have to understand your platforms at 144. You have to understand your 72 computers. You have to understand your 48 frames. You have to understand your 24 system. There's your position location, your pyramid. Then you have to extend the platform into the divots of the transits, okay, to the up signal in set position, okay? So you got two panels and both lines of brackets, torque field here and torque field here and grounds in set position, right? So this is where you understand the platforms of U and side tractions first. You know exactly they go from here, okay, direct, you go from there to there, and then you go from here to here in set position, right? So you're going here, here, and here in three signals of flux of communication and constellation. Very powerful stuff. Setting lines of the past, present, and the future in a conversation system, all existing all at once. Existing lines of platform, existing lines of time, existing lines of clockings, all at once. Platform setting, platform track locations. All through power acceleration. Now, setting ground lines sets position lines of your center position location in your system. Sets lines of platforms in track correlation system of your dimensional doors. Knowing exactly how to go through doors is sequence in line position and existing, all levels of measure and scale communication. Setting ground core centers puts all communication on platforms in track communication. Okay? Knowing how to signify up and knowing how to signify down. So the position of the XT1000 knows exactly where you are in measure and scale in its set position. Okay, in tractions. Sees you above and sees you below. All through indications of pi in communications. Ground lines is setting and process communication setting and travel. Okay? Setting core centers direct signals and flux overlines the black hole and sequence lines of panel and track communications. Okay? Setting course lines, directing lines in circulation rotation is center communication setting and travel. Okay? Core lines of settings are for balance of communications. See how powerful that is? So the faster you go, the more you spin faster. And the more you understand the position of your 24,000, your 48,000, your 72 computer, and your 144 crystal grid. So all you're doing in position is directing a redirect and creating a box in a frame in position location to a setting through a house and triangulation system all through travel. That's all you're creating is a house. You're creating the grounds of the holographic gridding, two window frames location of a door, into a runway, into a highway, into a graph, into holographic gridding. Process lines of center, process lines of equal, process lines of center, process lines of equal and travel. Four signals, lines of one signal. Process lines of high step, position location, high centers, cross line communications, and high position location of signal. Sending core lines of high step, position over line signal, crosses here, crosses location in the system. Process lines of indication setting, three lines of forward flux. Setting travel endpoint lines, communication setting, high travels and communication setting. Okay? So always see everything in travels inside and outside attractions. Inside and outside. That's the importance you guys have to understand how to use that through your computer. So everything you see, you start to understand what you're seeing. And this helps you and guide you to understand how to use that through your computer framing. How you see the inner core to the outer core, the inner spectrum to the outer spectrum. How to see numbers from inside and outside at the same time. And once you get into inside and outside, you have to frame that through a force signal that puts all communication of your weather in summer, spring, winter, and fall. Your weather communicates in everything in seconds, minutes, and hours. Okay, but everything's existing and constantly existing and expanding. Okay, to higher levels of frequencies in all position locations in your house and tractions. Inside, see? Inside and outside. Platform here, platform here. Okay, setting here and travel and track locations. Setting position I lines, high set position location in the system. Okay, ground lines, core centers, line direct signals, ground lines of calculation setting. Inside position of its house. Inside the house. Okay, so everything is inside. This is inside. This is outside. And that's what the team has to understand, how to see things in modification setting through the computer framing. How it comes into that line position location of a system, all through tractions, indirect signals. in all communication setting to your car that's inside the house. There's your car inside the house on top of the roof. But if you look at the core line settings in high track correlation to a system, all through its grounds in track correlation. Okay, in position of the center and travel communication setting, height lines of travel. Crossing lines of angles and line communication setting, high lines of surface communications. Okay, but that's the basic understanding of how to see everything from inside and outside of everything in travel. All through directions, all through points, all through position, location, setting. Processing that is always constantly changing everything through platform. Setting ground lines and setting over line sequence location system, all through travel and track locations. So I'm constantly changing the geometrics of everything, guys. It's at 24, it's 48, 72, and 144. And it's seconds, and it's minutes, and it's hours in traction. Okay? Platform here and line rotation. You got line communication as structure of its building. 4 lines of signals and 4 lines of set position. Okay, so you see the tower here, right? But you also see a highway beyond. So it's like looking above, but also looking below at the same time, right? So that's what you have to really get in positions of. And then you get a high lines of travels, okay? And here is the sun. Okay, here's the sun. Shining bright. Okay. So you're on top, okay, of the building, looking down. Okay? So it's ways of looking at this. And all communication setting, all through travel. How you modify that all through your system through a story frame. Okay? Look how powerful it is. It's self-telling its own operation of its setting of its own system. Existing and evolving at the same time measure of scale and balance. Okay? So that's what it is. You're constantly changing the frequencies. Okay, and that changes the seconds, minutes, and hours at each time frame. Everything's going to everything in set position all at once. And the more we understand that, the more we understand what we're doing and what we're seeing. Okay, in our vision, in our cortex, in our real reality. Okay? So, for example, if you're on top of the building and you're real time, okay, that doesn't mean you're going to be on top of the building. That just means that you're going to see above and see something below, which is its highway. That's all it is, right? So try to understand how to process all this inside your mind. Puts it in the conception of its inception, location to its reality in real time. How you see things in vision and cortex through its theta. Setting lines of box frames over lines of sequence, setting lines of communication setting, high lines of travel. Look how I'm changing the communication setting, all levels at set position case to its system, all through tractions. Okay? I changed it. Okay? It's amazing when you do these things. Look at that, something else. Okay? So there's a wall. There's a wall there now. So what you saw below is now a wall. And it's standing in front of the wall, okay? So it's really interesting how you see it in all lines of communication, all in setting, okay? So it's a constant, continuous flow that just keeps existing and evolving the system, all levels in high track location system, and high position location setting, and configuration of face recognition. Hooah. Okay. All right, so we'll stop there. There's a lot to be considered what's going on through the inner force and the outer force, the inner center. Get you guys to understand how to get basically thinking outside the triangulation box. Get you to understand how to get into your computer frames, intra-correlation system to your hardware and softwares. See you in 5.